This is BBC News. I'm Martine Croxall. The headlines. The Taliban say they have taken up positions inside Kabul airport and are ready to take control as soon as the Americans leave. The BBC understands British and US troops could end their operations within hours. The death toll after Thursday's devastating bomb attack at Kabul airport has increased to 170. 2 were British nationals and the child of another Briton was also killed. A US report into the origins of the coronavirus has been published, but its findings are inconclusive. It was unable to determine if the virus came from an animal or a lab leak. Manchester United say they've reached an agreement with the Italian club Juventus to re-sign Cristiano Ronaldo. The Portugal star left Manchester in 2009 for Real Madrid. Hello and welcome to our look ahead to what the papers will be bringing us tomorrow. With us, Jasmine Cameron-Chalashi of the Financial Times and broadcaster John Stapleton, both kindly staying here, so I'm not on my own. Tomorrow's front pages then is where we will begin. And of course, Afghanistan is still dominating the headlines. The Mirror leads with the news that 2 of those killed in the bomb attack at Kabul airport were British citizens and that the child of another Briton was also killed. Thousands abandoned to the Taliban. That's on the front page of the Eye after the UK leaves behind more than 1,000 Afghans who were eligible for evacuation from their home country. The Mail leads with a similar story and says leaving people behind could cause the biggest hostage crisis in Britain's history if they're captured by the Taliban or a local branch of Islamic State. The Times reports on US President Joe Biden's promise to avenge the deaths of the 13 US Marines killed in the bomb attack at Kabul airport. Away from Afghanistan, the Financial Times leads with the government's plea to hire UK-based workers in an effort to address Britain's chronic lorry driver shortage. There's only really one back page story tonight. The Daily Star leads with the second coming of Cristiano Ronaldo, who will return to Manchester United after a 12-year absence. Let's begin with the Times. John, US prepares to strike back. Joe Biden saying that he doesn't think those responsible for the deaths of something like 170 people, including 13 US military personnel, should be allowed to live on Earth any longer.
Yes, indeed. President Biden under the cosh, perhaps like no president since President Nixon in Watergate. He's saying tonight, or saying earlier today, rather, we will not forget, we will not forgive. You will pay, we will hunt you down. He has to say something like that, doesn't he, in the circumstances, because he is, as I say, under great pressure from all sides, including his own side, the Democratic side. Of course, the United States have attacked this organisation, ISIS-K, before. Very few of us were even aware of them until the last couple of weeks, but the intelligence services in the UK and here at home certainly were, and they've been attacked by the US and their allies in the past. And let's not forget, the US and their allies, us included, got rid of al-Qaeda from Afghanistan, eliminated them there, and they did eventually find Osama bin Laden, albeit in Pakistan. So, you know, these are not empty words. I'm sure they will retaliate. The question is, by retaliating, will President Biden end the war, the longest war the United States has ever been involved with, or just open up a new phase of it? That's the big question tonight, if indeed he does do that. Indeed,
and even if they use drone strikes, Jasmine, as we've seen many, many times before in this part of the world, there's a risk of civilians dying.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, I understand why President Biden has come out, you know, with such tough language. And obviously he's, you know, as we were just saying, he's got a lot of critics at home, a lot of people who are, you know, really not happy with his decision making. But I'm really skeptical as to how, you know, this doesn't actually escalate things. You know, the recent events have shown that it's not just the Taliban that the US and Western allies have to worry about. It's also ISIS, who are looking to exploit the situation and sort of gain influence in the area. And so, yeah, I'm not entirely sure how the US intends to attack in a way that doesn't provoke both the Taliban and ISIS. And I think in the midst of all this, we have to remember that there will be hundreds of thousands of, innocent Afghans who would be caught up in the middle of this. And actually, they didn't ask for any of this, and they could be on the verge of, another military conflict. And so, my heart really goes out to those people this evening who sort of, are going to be in the midst of all of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's tempting to think that Afghanistan is now homogeneously, John, controlled by the Taliban. But we know it's a very tribal society, always has been, complex to understand culturally. And there are many other armed groups, not least ISK, who said that they carried out the bomb attack at the airport yesterday. They're operating too, and the Taliban have got to keep on top of them as well.
Yes, indeed. Let's not forget ISIS-K, from what we know anyway, regard the Taliban as softies, to put it bluntly. They regard the Taliban as far too liberal in many respects. They're far more vicious. They're far more intolerant of women and the progress of women in work and in education, etc., than the Taliban. So there's a possibility, at least, of conflict between the two of them, although there has been some suggestion in the last 24 hours or so that the two have been, to some degree or otherwise, cooperating against the interests of the West. But on the face of it, they are sworn enemies. And of course, in addition to them, of course, there are all the local district warlords who may have their own battles to fight with each other, and indeed with ISIS-K, or indeed with the Taliban. So I think the conflict is anything but over. And let's not forget, this has been going on for donkey's years now. The Russians tried to sort out Afghanistan. They withdrew in 1989. The West moved in 2001. And I remember sitting by the side of John Reid doing breakfast television one day, and John Reid, then the Defence Secretary, said to me when the British troops moved in there, words to the effect that, he'd be surprised if we fired a shot in anger. I think he later qualified that to say they would not be unhappy if a shot was never fired in anger. Well, look what happened there. So who can predict what's going to happen now in Afghanistan in these new circumstances? A very volatile area and very unpredictable as well.
Jasmine, let's look at the Independent. Britain's among dead in Kabul airport bombing. This has become obvious during the course of the day, the nationalities of these three people, but among more than 180, the Independent is now saying. The death toll looking like it's climbing even further.
Yeah, and as we're getting more and more details, the scale of the tragedy is really becoming clear, and it really does sort of highlight the chaos and the instability of the region. Many of these people were individuals who had travelled across the country, who had really fought to get into the airport and were just hoping to get on a plane to hopefully get out of the country safely. And for them to die in such a tragic manner is genuinely heartbreaking. And I think we've really seen over the past few days the situation escalate. There was talk from ministers and from world leaders a couple of days ago that the situation was under control, that potentially the August the 31st deadline could be extended. But as we're increasingly seeing, actually, world leaders seem to be losing control of this, and it does seem to be getting increasingly chaotic as the days and hours go by.
John, let's look at the Daily Telegraph. PM's great regret at leaving Afghans behind. I mean, if the flights are going to come to a close, what chance do people have of reaching safety over the land border? I mean, that's fraught with difficulty if they're allowed to travel at all.
If they're allowed to travel at all, it's a very long journey to the border with Pakistan or Iran. I suppose the only hope is that the Taliban will keep the airport open because they've got a humanitarian crisis. They're short of food, they're short of water, they're short of medical supplies. So they will need to keep the airport open, arguably at least, to get supplies in. And if they do that, it's possible that they might allow commercial flights out to get some of those people, 1,000 or so people, Afghans with the perfect right to come to this country, out of that country, back to the UK or wherever they wish to go. But yes, but he's not the only one regretting what's been happening in the last few weeks and the last few months, I'm sure. Many people are still, not just at the Labour bench, on the Labour benches, but amongst his own backbenchers on the Tory side, asking why on earth has it, why on earth is it that after 18 months, we knew about this 18 months ago, we still haven't been able to process enough people who are eligible to come to this country through to the UK? Why is it that Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary, went on holiday when he must have known the Taliban were advancing? Why is it that the CIA and our own intelligence services didn't realise that in fact, the Afghan army would capitulate as quickly as they did, that the Taliban would advance as quickly as they did. Many questions to be asked, not for now, of course, because we need to get people out and sort out the situation there right now, but for the future when the inevitable inquiry will come, those are some of the questions, at least, which must be answered, because this is, the biggest foreign affairs catastrophe we've had, certainly in my memory.
Western forces, according to the Telegraph, Jasmine, have rescued around 100,000 people. But as the Allied forces leave, they leave with them a lot of military hardware, which is going to find a home amongst the Taliban and other armed groups.
Yeah, I mean, as we've been saying, we knew this evacuation and we knew we'd have to leave Afghanistan at one point. But the way in which we've done it just seems entirely chaotic. And as you said, we might be in a situation where, there's military gear left over that can easily fall into the wrong hands, which isn't what anyone wants, really. But I think just going back to what we were saying previously, I do think that actually, obviously Boris Johnson, has got to come out and say that he feels deep regret. But I think his words ring quite hollow. And I do think it's important to mention the fact that we do actually have a moral obligation to a lot of these Afghans who have, helped UK forces. And I think it actually sends a really bad message to our allies looking on. Actually, when you help and support the UK might not necessarily support you back. And I think it is also important to, make sure that those people who have arrived safely, that there's the support in the UK for them, and that we have, the local authorities have enough resources to help those who have arrived with nothing effectively restart their lives all over again.
Let's stay with the Daily Telegraph, Jasmine. NHS getting ready to vaccinate children in schools, this time in the age group 12 to 15. Mm-hmm.
So effectively, this story details the fact that Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, has drawn up plans, or has asked the NHS to draw up preparations to vaccinate 12 to 15-year-olds. So as the rules currently stand, 16 and 17-year-olds are eligible for the jab, and a small number of 12 and 15-year-olds are also eligible if they're particularly vulnerable or if they're living with people who are vulnerable. But so far, the JCVI haven't issued any approval for the mass vaccination of 12 to 15-year-olds. And so the government at the moment are obviously trying to put the preparations in place, but they're in quite a tricky situation because they're very conscious of the fact that schools are about to return. They don't want there to be widespread disruption in schools. They don't want high case rates. And so, they're very eager to sort of get this rollout started. But obviously, there are lots of moral and practical concerns around vaccinating children, notably whether, we should be using our doses on children who, when they do contract COVID, usually don't get very ill, when if we look to the developing world, there are still many people who haven't even had their first jab yet.
And whether children, John, are being vaccinated for their own good or to protect the rest of us. Scientists are still sort of weighing up whether this is absolutely the right idea.
Yeah, and they're quite right to do so for the reasons that Jasmine has very eloquently outlined. I agree with everything she said. I mean, if I was a parent, and it was recommended by the scientists that we vaccinate children between the ages of 12 and 15, I'd have no hesitation in doing so. We have children vaccinated for all sorts of things, don't we? Without, most of us anyway, without batting so much as an eyelid. I think, on paper at least, it's a good idea, but I think the ethical issue is a very important one. Is it, given the fact that children are highly unlikely to suffer very badly from this, is it right and proper that they get this vaccination when other people elsewhere could benefit perhaps more than they? It's an issue, but and as I say, as we said earlier, it's not in fact cast in concrete yet. I think it'll be a couple of weeks before the relevant committee pronounce on this, and some way to go. But I suppose the Health Secretary is correct to at least prepare for the eventuality.
Yes, let's look at the FT, John. Kwarteng call to hire UK workers. Talk us through this story, if you would.
Yeah, well, we've all been to the supermarket, haven't we? We've all seen the shortage of certain goods, the empty shelves there. We've all been to McDonald's and realised we can't get a milkshake. We've been to other outlets where you can't get various our favourite goods because, of course, these things are not coming through. It was explained to me today it's because of a combination, really, of Brexit and COVID. Because of COVID, a lot of foreign workers went home. When they went home, they found out because of Brexit, they couldn't get back in because the immigration rules had changed. And so we're now, I think, some 90,000, 100,000 short of lorry drivers. We have shortages in farming for fruit picking, etc., etc. And a real prospect that we may have serious food shortages for Christmas. It's not just, people flying a kite when they say this. This is the leaders of respectable retail outlets and retail organisations saying this is a real problem. Hence, some organisations, I think Tesco was one of them, offering big bonuses, signing on fees, as it were, for lorry drivers, £1,000 at a time to sign on and become a lorry driver. It's a real issue and one that's, is only going to get worse. But the business secretary is saying, no, let's just recruit, it's down to you to recruit British workers to do these jobs. But British workers certainly don't want to go fruit picking in the main. I mean, some do, obviously, but for years now, farmers have relied on foreign labour to do that. And at the moment, the way things stand, at least they don't want to be lorry drivers either, because the money's not good enough. So the answer is pay them more, and hopefully this might resolve itself. But until that time, I can't see any change, frankly.
No, supply and demand. But do people want to train to be lorry drivers? As John said, even if the pay is right, we've got to get them trained, Jasmine, because like a lot of things during COVID, driving tests, lorry driving tests, they just stopped.
Yeah, and I certainly think this isn't going to be an issue that is resolved, in a matter of days or weeks. We do need to put long-term investment in training and make sure that those who actually want to do this job are, adequately paid, and also they're trained and skilled in the proper way. And I think, this whole issue sort of underlies, I think we'll be seeing, lots of issues like this as we sort of, as the economy reopens and we start to feel the effects of Brexit slightly, a bit more. And I do think that, I think the business secretary is right in a sense to say that actually businesses do have to incentivise workers, and they do have to make these jobs more attractive in order to, to fill those vacancies.
Looking ahead to Christmas, as you just mentioned, John, there was already a warning today to say don't start panic buying for December the 25th. We're not even in September yet.
Well, I was in my local supermarket this morning, and I actually heard someone saying, what are you going to do if you can't get a turkey this Christmas? I thought, it's August, for heaven's sake. There's a long, long way to go before then. But, as soon as you say shortage of anything, there's a certain category of people you just know will go and buy all the toilet rolls, won't they? So you've seen the pictures. It's always the same people. Panic buying, absolutely unnecessary. I'm sure it's still unnecessary, even in the current situation, and it probably will remain so between now and Christmas. But certain people will go and do it. It's inevitable. It's a sad fact, but true.
Let's finish with a bit of sport, shall we? I'm going to start with Jasmine this time. Back page of the Daily Express. Here we have a very excited, powerful-looking Cristiano Ronaldo heading back to Manchester United. How could I get that wrong? How could I get that wrong in this company of all company? I'm not trying to provoke you, I promise, John. £12.8 million to buy him from Juventus.
It is an awful lot of money. And obviously, he's a great football player. We all love him. He's great at what he does. He's got a great fan base, and, he's been around for a while. But I can never get my head around those vast sums of money. And it just seems so excessive. But I guess, if it's supply and demand, if that's what people are willing to pay for him, then I don't blame him for, taking the deal.
I'm sure there's no sour grapes in this at all, John Stapleton, that your team, Manchester City, didn't get Cristiano Ronaldo after all. And Sir Alex Ferguson seems to apparently have had something to do with it.
Yes, indeed. According to Daily Mirror, at least, Sir Alex was the one who said to Ronaldo, you can't possibly go to Manchester City. That would be the ultimate betrayal. And who could argue with Sir Alex Ferguson? I don't know how interested Manchester City were. I mean, there was stories saying, he'd been talked to by Manchester City. Well, we talk to players. The club talks to players. I don't talk to them. The club talks to players all the time. I suspect that as soon as they found out how much he was going to cost in terms of his wages, which is quoted by one source today as £480,000 a week, unbelievable. If that's true, just even by football standards, staggering. That may well have put off Manchester City, because Manchester City have this reputation of being the money-based club, but they're not. They've, on a number of occasions, we have resisted paying enormous transfer fees because we suspected that the selling club saw Manchester City coming and thought, rub our hands with the they've got loads of dosh, let's screw them. Well, it ain't happening anymore, and Manchester City are quite right to not to fall for that kind of stuff. We don't need him. We won the league last year in the final of the Champions League. We're doing okay, thank you very much indeed. We're quite happy. Best of luck, Manchester United. Not too much luck, but best of luck.
Yeah, but that was then, and this is now. There's a new season ahead of us. But is Cristiano Ronaldo going to bring the trophies home for United? I mean, he's 36. He's an old man. I'd swap him, wouldn't you?
He's a good player. No, I'm joking. He's a very good player. He scored lots of goals for Juventus, and any club would be blessed to have him in their books. But at what price? And we have plenty of other options. Thank you very much indeed. Best of luck.
There's the Stapleton magnanimity, kind of.
It won't last.
It's stuck in your craw to say it, but well done. John and Jasmine, lovely to see you both. Thank you very much for talking us through the papers tonight. Do buy a paper in the morning, won't you? Coming up next, it's sport. Night-night.